Hey everyone, welcome to ProviNET's webinar on cybersecurity and managing cybersecurity threats. We're going to be talking about 10 really tangible ways that your organization can address some of the threats that exist, and I think it's going to be a really good discussion. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for joining today on our webinar. My name is Frank Mazuka and I'm ProviNET Solutions Marketing Specialist. Before we begin today, I would like to share some more information on ProviNET Solutions and our presenters as well. ProviNET Solutions is a full-service IT company that offers a comprehensive spectrum of technology products and services. For over 20 years, ProviNET has been providing solutions you can trust. Our first presenter is Joe Velderman. Joe serves as ProviNET's Director of Consulting Services and is a vital resource to clients in assisting them with strategic planning and the implementation of contemporary technology. Joe has been working as an IT professional since 2012, and he started with ProviNET's team in 2006. He holds several software and hardware certifications and is considered a valuable source of expertise in strategic planning and as it relates to technology. Tim Bakker is our other presenter today. Tim has been with ProviNET Solutions since 2002. He is our solutions architect. Tim designs, supports, and coordinates installation of various low voltage systems, which include network switching, routing, telephone systems, card access, nurse call, wander management solutions, and much, much more. Please follow us on our social media pages. We are on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and you could also visit us online at www.provinet.com. We're going to get back into the webinar now. When the webinar ends, we will be more than happy to answer your questions. So please submit them in the chat box below, and we will have Joe and Tim answer them when we're done. Thank you very much, and enjoy.
All right, well, welcome back. Thanks so much again for joining us today. My name is Joe Velderman. I'm the Director of Consulting Services at ProviNET Solutions. I have with me today one of our esteemed experts in cybersecurity, Tim Bakker. He's going to be walking us through some really, really tangible ways that your organization can address some cybersecurity threats that you may or may not even know are affecting your organization or have the potential to affect your organization. There's been a lot of traction in the news about this lately, and I think that this is a really relevant topic, and so we wanted to be sure to host this webinar. Thanks so much again for joining us. So the format for the webinar, we're going to kind of talk for a little while, explain what some of the cybersecurity threats are and why those are potentially dangerous to different organizations, and then we're going to talk about some ways that we can mitigate some threats. And we'd like for you to really be interactive throughout this process. And so if you click on the GoToWebinar program, you should be able to submit a question. And Tim and I will be happy to field any questions at the end of our presentation. And we'll be able to try to address as many of those as we can. We've also made a PDF of our PowerPoint presentation available to you. And so if you want to download that PDF, that's also available through GoToWebinar. It's the same thing that we've got on the screen here behind us. So with that, let's just dive right in and talk about some cybersecurity stuff. So our objectives for this morning are to really try to educate the audience what cyber activities are actually threatening organizations today. What are some of the threats that are out there? We know that there's been some recent news about different cybersecurity threats. Recently with the Wannacry and some of the Google Docs issues, and so we'll talk about those briefly. We'll talk about prevention and protection. This is really kind of the meat of our discussion this afternoon, but we really want to talk about ways that organizations can defend themselves against cybersecurity threats. Why is it important? Well, there's a lot of different threats that are out there. This is some information that we've got up on the screen here about the top 10 cyber threats that affect different organizations. on a daily basis. This information was actually published by the Health Information Management Society of America, and it kind of looks just at healthcare organizations, but it's pretty representative of the data that many of us face as organizations when it comes to cybersecurity. So phishing and spear phishing attempts, this is where you may receive an email that looks like it's a very legitimate email, but in reality it's not. It's trying to collect information about you in an attempt to glean even more information about your systems or to try to steal information even. Negligent insiders, people don't realize this often, but negligent insiders can be a major threat when it comes to cybersecurity. Oftentimes this is users who have the best of intentions and they want to take a USB thumb drive home with them to get some work done or something like that, and they don't realize that by taking that information away from the organization or taking it off of the network can actually really impact the security of that information. What are advanced persistent threats, Tim?
Advanced persistent threats are ones that may install inside of your network, and they may live there indefinitely waiting for someone out on the internet, someone with malicious intent perhaps, to go ahead and activate them to perhaps affect your organization directly or attack another organization that they set their eyes on. It's basically just something that's sitting inside your network that hasn't necessarily been activated yet, but it's just waiting for the right time to go ahead and do some sort of damage.
Kind of like a Trojan horse, huh?
It can be a Trojan horse. It really could be anything. It more or less is just sitting there waiting for a command to go ahead and execute. That command really could be anything.
Yep. Well, more than 60% of the organizations out there have faced one of these three threats. And so they're really very prevalent in today's modern technology age. You can see from the list here that more than 50% of organizations have also been affected by known software vulnerabilities or zero-day attacks, cyber attacks, which are also really prevalent, but not quite as common as some of those top three. Just a whole wealth of different ways for individuals or organizations or states in some cases to be really evil towards organizations and stealing information. And so that's why we wanted to talk about this today. Some recent cyber threats that we've seen in the news, Wannacry. There's been a lot of press about Wannacry. This affected a lot of people, primarily I think in Great Britain and in European countries. But what happened with the Wannacry virus, Tim?
So Wannacry really started out, it was part of a set of tools that the NSA had to perhaps spy or surveil Windows computers mainly. So it was a weakness to the Windows operating system that the NSA was aware about, but they kept that quiet and secret in order to exploit it for their own means. This information got leaked out to the world in April of 2017, and at that point it was kind of a time clock for someone to develop tools that could use it for really any malicious intent that they had. Wannacry was really the first use of that exploit in which they developed a virus that could encrypt all the files on a person's computer and possibly on an organization's network, and then demand a ransom in order to get the keys back to their network and use that. We call that ransomware.
So let me get this straight. Our own United States government found out that there were some exploits within certain Windows operating systems and didn't say anything about it, with the intent of potentially using those exploits for what?
National security is what they were using it for, and that's been a struggle inside the IT community for quite some time. Is there's been kind of an ongoing conversation that says, the government, has these tools, and everyone is kind of aware that they have these tools, but does the government have an obligation to contact Microsoft or Apple or whoever that vendor is and make them aware that there's these flaws in their software?
Right.
Or does the government keep quiet about it in order to use it for their own security purposes? In this case, the government decided to remain quiet about this exploit, but then in today's world where all this information is leaking out and someone decided that had access to this information to publish this information, well, now that put everyone in a position where Microsoft had to quickly release a patch for this, and all these security vendors, now that they're aware of it, need to take preventative steps to prevent something like Wannacry.
Okay. So what was the impact of Wannacry? I mean, we know where it came from, and we know sort of what the impact of that, or what the cause of that was. But what was the impact of that?
Well, the impact really was that a number of Windows machines, mainly Windows 7 machines, were infected, largely in Europe, but across the globe. Europe and Russia, I believe, were the largest hit areas, in which their computers were infected. It locked down all the files on that and demanded a ransom for them to obtain the keys. Now, that lasted approximately a day or two until a researcher was able to find a way to kind of disable the virus. And at that point, it rendered it pretty well useless. But again, there's nothing to say that another variant doesn't come out that doesn't have that ability to be disabled as easily, or requires a more complex algorithm to disable.
Do we know who's behind the release of the actual Wannacry variant of this NSA leak?
Not specifically. There's been some rumor that that the North Korean government may even be behind it. It's really hard to say who these anonymous people are. They're well shielded, and that is something that the security groups have been looking into. But as of right now, really anything is rumor as to who the actual perpetrator of that was.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, we know that the impact was great. Over 400,000 workstations affected. And of those 400,000 workstations, 98% of them were Windows 7 workstations. So that's still a supported operating system by Microsoft. Microsoft released a patch, and it really speaks to one of the things we're going to talk about later, keeping up with all these patches and updates from Microsoft, right? What about the other major security threat that made headlines recently, the Google Docs exploit?
So the Google Docs exploit was more of what I would call like a phishing attack. In that instance, they someone that would have sent you an email, and it would have said, "I've shared this Google document with you. Click here to be able to open it."
Right.
That opened a link, in which case it would have asked permission for you to share your Gmail, to authorize this application to access your Gmail account.
Right.
At which point, most people just click accept. They don't necessarily understand what they're accepting. Sure. They just want to open that document.
I receive an email from you that looks to be very legitimate with a lot of Google branding on it, and it says, "Hey, Tim Bakker wants to share this Google document with you. I think I better look at that."
In reality, what that exploit did, though, is when you tried to open the document and it prompted you, it was Google saying, "This application wants to access your Gmail account." Most people didn't really read it or understand it correctly, and they click accept. And what they've done at that point is given someone full access to their email, their contacts, anything that they have associated with their Google account. Not necessarily clear what the intentions were behind whoever wrote that exploit, but they did have full access to anyone that accepted those terms, and they could have read all their emails and likely used that for additional exploits later on. Maybe if you're a businessman, now they know current business that you're working with somebody else in which they could try to launch more phishing attacks or get some sort of money.
There's a lot of businesses, a lot of schools that use Google as their predominant platform for email, right?
Exactly.
And, I know that this affected a lot of them. How did Google, or what did Google do to kind of shut this one down?
So they use, this technology is pretty common. I mean, anytime that you see, use Facebook to log into some other service, this is somewhat by design that they allow things like this. But once they became aware of this, they started shutting down this app and its ability, as well as researching what users had allowed this app, and then hardening that in order to remove that access. Okay. That took them a better part of a day, though, from the time that they became aware of it and to the point where they kind of had contained it.
So within the last 6 weeks, or 8 weeks, there's been some pretty substantial populations of people across the globe that have been affected by just 2 major cybersecurity breaches, which have made notable news. Yep. But there's hundreds of cybersecurity breaches that happen every single day that don't make news, and thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people that are affected by this on a daily basis. Sometimes more severely than others, but lots of people have their data or information breached or made available to people who they otherwise wouldn't have granted permission to have that information. Sure. So certainly some pretty scary stuff.
Definitely.
Well, let's kind of get into not the scary side of it, but how can we prevent this type of thing from happening? And just kind of a word of caution. I'm not sure if there's 100%. Here's what you need to do in order to fully protect yourself, right? I don't think we can ever fully say that an organization is 100% protected or not at risk for some sort of cybersecurity breach, right? Because it's an ever-evolving topic, and new threats and new vulnerabilities are exposed on an hourly basis. But there's some really good things that organizations can do that are pretty tangible things, pretty easy to implement, really, that would really bolster their ability to prevent cybersecurity breaches, right?
Exactly. Really, you'll never fully protect yourself, but you can also kind of limit your exposure to some of these breaches by just taking these tangible steps.
Yeah. Let's dig in and talk about them. The first one on here, policies and procedures. Virtually no cost to develop policies and procedures for your organization. But tell us why a policy, something that we wrote down on a piece of paper, or a procedure, something that we expect people to follow on a regular basis. Tell us why policies and procedures help us to secure our organizations.
Well, first of all, it starts a discussion. In order for your organization to protect itself, you have to start to understand, well, what are we protecting ourselves from? That starts with a conversation internally to kind of educate, your leadership to understand, what is the threat and why is it important. But then kind of on the procedure portion of it, one of the major things that we need to do as an organization is to educate our end users as far as, what should you look for and try to avoid and things like that. And kind of lay some ground rules for them and some expectations for them that come out of these procedures. That they can kind of follow and help them understand why the things that you're asking them to do are important. Mm-hmm. That really comes from that policy and procedure process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think if end users were simply educated on the threats that they face by just using their computer, whether it be a phishing email or something that they download from the internet, or something that they're taking with them from their computer, they would understand that those things are risky transactions that happen, and those can easily not only impact a single workstation, but it can impact an entire network of workstations very quickly, right? Yeah. So I totally agree. Education is really important. And I think that's a really, again, easy thing that organizations can do. There's great policies and procedures that are out there that you could download for free off of the internet if you don't know where to start. There's organizations that can help you develop policies and procedures if you really think that you need to have some expert advice on that topic. But start that conversation. And you also brought up a really good point with regards to policies and procedures, and that's just educating key decision makers around the organization. We do this with some of our customers where we help them understand what is the risk that you face as an organization as it relates to cybersecurity threats. And it's oftentimes really interesting because we find out that the key decision maker at the organization, whether it be the president or the CEO or the owner of the organization, they're oftentimes the ones that are most interested in what that risk level is. Sometimes they're facing pressure from the board about what cybersecurity threats they may be facing or what they're doing to mitigate cybersecurity threats. But ultimately, they don't want to see their organization on the 6 o'clock news at night, right?
Exactly.
So that's a really, really great, tangible thing that organizations can do. And again, pretty easy. What's this next one? Next generation firewall. I've heard this term, next gen firewall, but what's the difference between my 3 or 4 year old firewall and a next gen firewall?
Sure. So previously we had, and this is a little bit of nerd talk, so you'll have to excuse me for that, but we call them stateful packet inspection firewall. Think of that like you go to the airport and they put a ticket on your luggage that says, this is where this bag is coming from and this is where it's going. And that's really all that firewall looked at. It said, all right, do I like where it's coming from? And am I okay with where it's going? Mm-hmm. As long as, those matched, we let that traffic come into our network from the internet or wherever it was coming from.
Right.
Next generation firewall, we look at it at a deeper level is really what it comes down to is rather than just looking at where the source of that traffic is and where the destination is, we're looking at what's inside that. Does it contain malicious code? Is it somehow dangerous to my organization? And we're making decisions on that, as well as looking at it from different perspectives. If you go to the doctor and they do an X-ray and a CAT scan and an ultrasound of your chest, mm-hmm. all of those things are looking at your chest, but they're looking at it from a different perspective. Mm-hmm. And they might tell the doctor something different. That's mm-hmm. why a next generation firewall is doing it. It's looking at that traffic from a more holistic point of view and then determining whether it should allow that traffic into your network.
I really like your explanation about the airline checking the baggage, right? Is it the difference between customs and the TSA, where the TSA is doing a radiology scan on my bag as it passes through, and customs is just kind of looking at a card to make sure that I am who I am and I'm taking what I said I'm taking?
Essentially, yeah, we're looking inside that bag and we want to know, to the best of our knowledge, is that bag safe?
Yeah.
If it is, great. Continue on.
Yeah. So I know it used to be with firewalls, you would buy the device and put it on your network and maybe pay an annual fee for maintenance or updates on that. But more and more firewalls seem to be coming with some subscription services. Mm-hmm. What's that all about? What are the subscription services providing?
So subscription services are providing a way to look into all of that, where, for antivirus, it's looking at, current viruses, so you're allowed to have current definitions. It may be what they call geo-IP blocking, where addresses across the internet are associated to different companies. So if you wanted to block, Russian or Chinese traffic or something like that, it's keeping those addresses up to date to where you can maintain those different ways to look at that network. So it's really a service provided by the manufacturer to keep that updated on a daily or in a lot of cases hourly basis for current threats out there.
So it's not just a way for Cisco and SonicWall and Palo Alto to make more money, right? It's actually a valuable service that you can subscribe to and receive routine, oftentimes hourly or sometimes even more frequent than that, updates on virus definition files or real-time blacklists, just really much more proactive, current ways of mitigating any bad traffic that may be trying to enter or exit your network.
And just to point out, with Wannacry, those virus definitions were out long before Wannacry actually hit, because once that NSA exploit was made known, companies such as SonicWall, Cisco, Palo Alto, all started publishing definitions to prevent such an attack.
Right.
And so a lot of their customers were protected if they had those services. So it really does make a lot of sense to invest in a quality next-gen firewall, as well as the services to help protect your company.
Yeah. No, I know. I was really impressed when I was talking to some of our engineers at ProviNET. We have some next-gen firewalls, obviously, that operate our data center, and they were saying that our firewalls actually were able to stop Wannacry traffic from entering our network when that exploit was happening.
Exactly.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. What about network security? Kind of a broad topic, but how can we enforce network security?
There's a couple different ways, but think of this scenario where you have a conference room with a network port just sitting there wide open, and it could be anybody walking into that and plugging in any computer and having access to your network. Now that could be completely harmless. They could have no ill intent, but if they had a virus or did have ill intent, they have a physical connection to your network now that's typically not as well protected historically as we have secured ourselves from the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So really, network security focuses on how do I take that scenario or the wireless scenario where someone brings in a device, and whether they have malicious or non-malicious intent, prevent them from infecting me or causing harm to my network in some way.
Right.
That really can boil down to the BYOD phenomenon that we have today. Where in a lot of companies, employees bring in their own cell phones, tablets, or even laptop computers. And again, as an organization, how do we kind of keep a level of control where we can make sure that we protect ourselves from that device?
Right.
This can come down to really two main products, something called mobile device management.
Okay.
Mobile device management is kind of a way for us to provision these BYOD devices to have certain requirements, make sure that they have antivirus. Maybe by where that device is located or what type of device that is, we create rules that says, they can access my accounting software when they're inside the building, but when they're off-site, that application is off limits.
Yep.
So it really allows us to set our policies that we've made inside that software, but more importantly, enforce those policies across the board through our systems, as opposed to just relying on our end users to practice it well.
Gotcha. And what's the other product? You mentioned mobile device management.
Policy management. There's a couple. Aruba makes one called ClearPass Manager.
Yep.
Cisco makes one called ICE. Basically, these have ways where we can authenticate our users to their devices, whether the company owns them or the end user brings it in themselves. Similar, enforce antivirus, enforce standards on that. Maybe if someone plugs into that conference room and I don't recognize that device, I'll allow them to have internet access, but I won't allow them to access any other part of my network. So it's really a system to automate a lot of those processes and make sure that our policies are enforced, but also make it easy for the end user to remain compliant in that.
Yep. So, I know when wireless kind of first came out, everyone was really excited about implementing wireless in their communities or in their buildings or in their offices. And, the immediate threat with that was, well, we don't want somebody sitting in our parking lot stealing our Wi-Fi or hopping on our network, scanning our network, right? So we would put long passcodes on our wireless network, and eventually that kind of evolved, and we were able to do passwords that people could remember, and then it was, now let me authenticate with my username and my password. But that's even evolved more than that now to not just wireless networks, but also wired networks. And, it all boils down to making sure that the people who are on our business networks are who we want to have on those networks, right?
Exactly. Ensuring that someone logging onto our network is who they are, that the devices that they're using, that we understand, is that a corporate-owned device or is that a personal device? And maybe we have different rules for that same user based off of which device they're using. Right. So that gives us a lot of flexibility to kind of define that, as well as enforce good policies.
Yeah. And I just want to, and I think this is so important as we start talking about the Internet of Things. We have a world of smart toasters and smart wine refrigerators and all kinds of smart devices suddenly that we can put on a wireless network for convenience. But we have no idea what sort of security is built into those types of devices. All of a sudden, I bring my smart toaster to the office and plug it in because I want to know when my toast is done. But you have no idea, as a network administrator, what kind of security is built into that smart toaster. And it may be a major threat to your network, right?
Exactly. There was a case last year where a company that manufactured security video cameras, CCTV cameras, had a flaw in their product. Yep. And what happened was someone used all of those cameras all the way around the world to launch a denial of service attack, and that took companies such as Netflix down because they had hundreds of thousands of security cameras basically launching an attack on them simultaneously. So, any device can be used maliciously, and really the best protection is having a good set of network security to make it more difficult for that device to be used for that purpose if it does perhaps have that vulnerability.
Really good information. Really good information. Email filtering. We've been doing email filtering for a long time because none of us like to get spam messages, right? Mm-hmm. But how has email filtering evolved to even further protect organizations?
So the first step is really a virus protection, where it looks at all these threats and stays up to date and tries to prevent that. The other thing that you want to keep in mind is if someone's going to send one of your users a phishing email, we can filter out a lot of those by looking at different portions of how that email was sent, where is it coming from, and email security appliances do that very well. They're very efficient in checking the reputation of these email addresses. Unfortunately, with millions of emails floating around an organization every day, they won't catch 100%. Right. But they will filter out 99% of that email. Right. And lower the threat to an organization from email. On top of that, it's nice to get less spam in your email and not have 1,000 messages to filter through every day.
Yep. Really good. Really good. Antivirus, but we put cloud antivirus up here. I think that's pretty common these days, right? But what's the advantage of a cloud antivirus service as opposed to a centrally deployed or even individual AV program?
In a lot of ways, they're the same thing. And in some cases, they're the same product. The advantage to a cloud antivirus solution is it's typically offered by a managed service provider who is looking out for your organization. He's making sure that it's updating regularly, that the machines inside your organization, that it's deployed across the board on all machines. Unfortunately, what we've seen kind of in the, go out and purchase your antivirus and install it on computers is sometimes you're lacking that consistency. Maybe, 3 computers in your organization don't have it and nobody's keeping an eye on that, or some computers stop getting updates. So it's more about the managed service that a company that provides the cloud antivirus for you is offering, and their ability to ensure that that system is working properly.
Yeah. I know the whole notion behind cloud AV is that as long as that device is connected to the internet, it's in communication with the cloud AV service, and it's getting routine updates, virus definition files, new threat warnings, and it's reporting back to the cloud as well about any issues that it may be experiencing. So it's more of a really good real-time heartbeat monitor with the central information repository for a lot of these virus definition files.
And on top of that, you have a professional that is versed in these different threats and the software who is keeping tabs on that for your organization.
Yep. Really important. This kind of came up with Wannacry, right? Patch management. 400,000 workstations could have been spared being vulnerable to Wannacry if they had only kept up with their patches from Microsoft, right?
Correct, yeah. Microsoft released a patch to close the Wannacry exploit before Wannacry hit. So, I mean, that patch was out there. Unfortunately, a lot of organizations have a hard time making sure that all their computers are patched and validating that against different software that they may be running and whatnot. So patch management really is a solution in which you can deploy that patch globally across your organization and keep track in real time what products haven't been patched, why not, and remediate those as quickly as possible. Microsoft typically releases their patches on a monthly basis. They call it Patch Tuesday.
Patch Tuesday, yep.
And, as soon as that hits, those patches are available, and using a good patch management software greatly eases the burden of ensuring that those get out to your end user workstation.
Do we use some sort of a patch management software tool at ProviNET?
Yeah, we use a product called ConnectWise Automate. It was previously called LabTech. That does a number of things for us, one of them being patch management.
Okay, great. BYOD, we talked about it a couple minutes ago, but this is a really popular topic today. I've got my work cell phone and my work laptop, but I may want to bring my personal tablet to the office, or as a consultant, we're constantly going in and wanting to get on other people's networks. It's kind of a BYOD type of a scenario too. Talk about how is BYOD a threat, and what are some ways that we can mitigate that?
Sure. BYOD is a threat because we don't control that object. As far as patch management or antivirus or anything like that, we as an organization don't have insight into that. And that's what really makes it a threat. We don't know what apps that a user may have installed on that tablet, and how that may affect us. So really, BYOD is a security risk in the sense that we don't know. So really, placing fences around that, detecting that is a BYOD device, and then making security decisions based off of that, as well as the user using that device, is really the key to that.
Yep. Yeah, we kind of talked about that with the whole smart toaster thing, so
sure.
we'll kind of leave it at that. Another thing an organization can do to prevent cybersecurity threat is conducting penetration testing. This is kind of a buzzword right now. We hear of a lot of organizations saying, we'll do a penetration test for you. What does that really entail? What makes up a good penetration test, and what's not such a good penetration test?
So what a basic penetration test would be, you hire a third party, and what they do is they scan your internet connections, and they start looking for holes in your firewall, things that you may have opened up for legitimate reasons to host a website or for your webmail application, but also seeing what is open to the internet, and then what vulnerabilities might be exposed. Maybe your email server is missing some patches that fix a vulnerability. A penetration test can help you show you that. Penetration can show you that you have ports open on your firewall that you no longer need open. It really gives you an idea of how you're exposed externally.
Okay.
A better penetration test they'll come in and they'll run that internally. So they'll start looking at not just what's externally facing the internet, but what's going on inside the organization from a perspective of, if I plug into an end user's port, what can I gain access to? And then some others may even come in and they'll just walk into an organization, and see, hey, is there a computer that someone left, unlocked and open that I can sit down at, and once I do that, what can I gain access to? So there's different levels of service that you can get from these third parties to perform this testing, but really the end game is to show you what you may not already know and where your vulnerability may exist, so that way you can address that.
Right. And I know part of that is oftentimes a social engineering engagement as well, right? Where a third party may send somebody into the organization to see what sort of credentials they can get to get on a workstation or get on a network. And that seems like it would kind of be a fun job.
Yeah, there was I believe it was on National Geographic where there were what they would call white hat hackers. These are the good guys. These are guys that hack networks for good. They want to understand what these vulnerabilities are and help companies protect themselves. And it was a bank in Europe that hired them, and their job was they could pick any branch of this bank to see if they could get onto their network and what they could do. They decided that it would be best for them to go to the main branch of the organization. Wow. And they had a USB stick that if they could get that onto a computer, they could remotely control that machine.
Oh, wow.
Gather credentials for people, pretty much have the keys to the whole thing.
Yep.
And so they went ahead and did that, and they were successful. They just walked into the bank, they started, one of them talked to a teller while another one just went and sat down at one of the loan officer's computer, and it was unlocked. He put his USB key on it. They were there in and out in 5 minutes.
Wow.
And had everything that they needed.
Wow. Fun story, but kind of a scary scenario.
Very scary scenario. It was interesting. The bank hired them to go back in there 6 months after their initial report. And at that point, yes, that bank was very much, had stepped up. They were noticing who came in, where they were going, things like that. So it was much less lax.
Good. So we talked about prevention, a number of different ways that organizations can institute some, again, really tangible, really easy, pretty inexpensive things to prevent a lot of cybersecurity breaches. What about from a protection layer? I think that, we think about prevention as being, how do we mitigate this from happening? Protection is, okay, what if it actually did happen? What are we going to be able to lean on as a fail-safe in case if we do get breached somehow, right? So I know one of the things we wanted to talk about was backups.
So making sure that you have backups. In the case of ransomware such as Wannacry, they encrypt that traffic and lock, or they encrypt that data and they lock you out of it, and really leave you with the choice of either paying that ransom, which encourages those who have made that software, or if you have backups, you can restore from backup. So having a valid backup of all of your data, making sure that those backups are working, not just saying, yeah, I have a backup, but never actually ensuring that backup works, gives you an option to restore that data if it does get encrypted, to prevent being in a position where you could have to pay thousands of dollars to someone who basically locked you out of your own house.
Right. More and more today, we're seeing a lot of organizations move from a traditional, hey, let's back this up to tape and store it in a safe or something like that. There's more and more services that are becoming available to back up over the internet or back up over the wire. What's the advantages to something like that?
There's a couple advantages. The first one is, historically we relied on tape backup, and tapes could be cumbersome. You had to ensure that the people that were responsible for putting those tapes in, were able to do that every day. What happens when they go on vacation or are sick? A lot of organizations, they went and had a good backup that day. The time for a tape backup or a lot of self-hosted, what we call today, backups, is just the amount of time that it would take to back up that data maybe wasn't feasible in the nighttime hours or the time that was available to actually do that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of cloud-based backup solutions today, and they address that by automating it to make sure that you have automatic backups regardless of whether the person's in the office or not.
Yep.
They do verification of that, and they're able to do that verification because they do this Delta type incremental type backup, which speeds up that process significantly over what we were able to do previously. It takes that data offline, so that way if there's a natural disaster that we don't have to worry about, the data being gone from that. Or if, with tapes, a concern was, is somebody having this in their purse or in their car and then that getting stolen, and then what about our data? Who has that?
Negligent users, right?
Negligent users. So
here you've got somebody who's thinking that they're doing a really good service for the organization, and they're storing the backup tapes for the whole organization in the trunk of their car or something like that, not realizing that that could very easily get exposed.
And the last thing is we're ensuring that data is encrypted. So when a cloud-based platform, any good one, is going to encrypt that data before it sends it over the wire to the backup provider.
Yep.
So that data is secure all the way to the provider, and then when it gets written at the provider to another hard drive somewhere, it's going to stay encrypted at rest on those disks as well. So really the only one that has the keys to unlock that data is the original organization that subscribed to the service.
Wow.
So
It
it ensures that that's secure, gets it offline, and makes it a very efficient process.
It's a much, much more secure data backup.
Exactly.
That's great. That's great. So cyber liability insurance, obviously, we hope that you never have to use cyber liability insurance, just like we hope you never have to use car insurance or homeowners insurance. But it is exactly that, there for that reason. It's insurance. And so what types of things does cyber liability insurance typically cover, Tim?
In the healthcare field, there's a number of HIPAA violations that can occur through a cyber lapse for security.
Yep.
Such as fines. You might be fined by the government for some negligence that they might feel that you had that allowed you.
Right.
It also helps cover the cost of finding out what happened. Like, how did they get into my network? What do I need to do to prevent this from happening again? So it will help you cover some of those costs. It helps you cover reparations that may be due to those whose information, if someone were to get my social security number, my name, address, all that, they're entitled to some compensation. So cyber liability insurance will help you cover that, as well as any attorney fees that you might have in really trying to take care of this whole mess.
Yeah, the reparations thing is really huge. I know, like, with a lot of the major data security breaches that we've seen in the news over the last year, if you think about like Target or Home Depot or any of the major ones that have really made headline news, most of those organizations have had to purchase something like a LifeLock subscription for every customer that was affected by that data breach.
Exactly.
Or they may have had to send out costly letters or mea culpas explaining that all of those customers need to get new credit cards or debit cards or something like that because that information was breached. So there's oftentimes a cost associated with cybersecurity breaches, even beyond the fines that you may be facing or the bad press that you may be facing. There seems to be a social responsibility to have to make reparations for that as well.
Exactly.
So, well, Tim, thanks so much. This has been really informative. It's been great having you here with us today. We really appreciate all of your insights on this. I think I learned a lot today. It's been great. So thank you all for joining us. At this time, if you have submitted any questions, we'll take a look at those and we'll try to answer those as best as we can. And we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. And hope you have a great day.
Thank you.